Before we start, my mom's worked in an office her whole life, so I've seen how this situation go down. This isn't just some story for clicks, it's inspired by real experiences. The goal is simple, help people recognize patterns, avoid pain, and take back power. All names in companies have been changed or made up. Let's get into it.
I knew something was off when the VP stormed into our Thursday sync with sweat on his upper lip and a printout of a dashboard error in his hand, like it was a smoking gun. "Your system's choking dispatch," he snapped before I could finish my coffee. Not my system. Their system. Running on my code, on a license they never bothered to read. He wanted to scream. I wanted to ask why he thought I still owed them stability after being fired like a temp on a bad Tuesday. But that moment wasn't even the real beginning. The real beginning was 5 months earlier, when they brought in Austin Klein. Fresh from some shiny logistics startup in Dallas where people use terms like disruptive routing and lean velocity. His onboarding slideshow had actual flames in the corner. Flames, like he was giving a TED Talk to firefighters. I sat through his vision pitch, chewing a pen cap and counting how long it would take before he mentioned AI. It took 2 minutes and 46 seconds. He didn't ask me anything about how Core Pulse worked. Didn't ask why we'd never had a compliance penalty under my watch. Didn't ask how we routed nearly $180 million in freight without a single missed SLA during COVID bottlenecks. He just made a face when I told him the scheduler stack had been stitched together during a supply chain panic 7 years ago. I'd built it out of necessity, through my LLC at the time when their entire vendor ops team got laid off and someone had to stop the bleeding. Now, it was a legacy mess. So I wrote down what he said in my notebook under the little sketch I'd made of his perfect haircut. And I waited. Hey, real quick before I keep going, 97% of people listen to stories like this without subscribing. It only takes a second to like the video and hit subscribe, and it truly helps our team keep these stories coming. Thank you. Anyway, he didn't know what he didn't know, and nobody stopped him, because the board was tired. Because the previous director had quietly retired after screwing up a vendor renewal so badly I had to clean it up over Christmas Eve. Because nobody wanted to argue with the guy in the $900 blazer using phrases like versionless deployment. I kept doing my job, quietly, cleanly. Every dispatch, every SLA, every update, it all ran through Core Pulse, and Core Pulse ran because I did. The hilarious part? Nobody on the new exec team had any idea what retained license meant, or that the scheduler engine they depended on, the one they were trying to quietly migrate to some sexy new SaaS vendor in San Francisco, wasn't actually a TrendCore asset. Not in the way they thought. I'd built it under my LLC during the 2016 vendor crisis, and while they converted me to FTE the following year, nobody ever bothered to paper the IP transfer. They just kept using it and paying the invoice every quarter, not reading it, not questioning it. I didn't hide the clause, I didn't sneak in the license, it was all there. Clause 9C, buried in the second renewal amendment, clear as glass. The Core Pulse scheduler stack was leased from my company, not owned outright. No assignment, no transfer, no rehost without consent. And when Austin swaggered into his first team meeting and said, "We're gonna sunset this Frankenstein in 90 days, no lawyers, no legacy drag," I knew I didn't have to say a damn word. He'd fire me before he understood me. So I did what I always did. I documented everything, quietly, thoroughly. I cleaned up my schema maps, flagged every indirect dependency I knew they'd ignore, backed up the last stable build on my own local for reference. Then I scheduled a haircut, because I had a hunch I'd want to look damn good walking out of that building. Turns out, I was right. He came for me the second the vendor demo hit a snag. Said I wasn't aligned with the new architecture. Told HR I was resistant to change. Called my quiet pushback non-collaborative. They booked the termination meeting on a Tuesday morning, 9:06 a.m., coffee still warm, badge still active. Me still smiling, because Core Pulse was still humming, and they didn't know the difference between control and custody, but they were about to learn. Austin didn't walk into the building. He arrived. Every day. Loudly, clapping backs, stomping through glass conference rooms like he was auditioning for a tech reboot of The West Wing. Half the company fell for it. The other half was too tired to care. But what I noticed first was the red ink. Not on budgets, on people. my people. Within 2 weeks, he dissolved the project integrity team, said it was redundant. 2 days later, Dispatch flagged an unresolved queue loop that cost us a $75,000 service credit. When I escalated it, he smiled and said, "Let's not focus on blame. Let's focus on vision." His version of vision looked like a sleek slide deck and a unicorn vendor from San Francisco called Portwave. They've got modern architecture, a killer UI, AI-driven rebalancing, he told the board in a QBR. We'll be live in 90 days. Nobody asked how we'd port over 1,200 vendor hooks or what we'd do with our SLA-triggered compliance engine, because nobody but me knew how it worked. Austin just wanted Core Pulse out, and fast. That's when the email started. "Hey, need access to the back-end scheduler logic for mirroring. Quick favor, can you export routing conditions from the stack? Legal's still reviewing Portwave's agreement, but let's start migrating the engine anyway, just a working copy." Each one came with more pressure, less formality. At the Tuesday meeting, Austin leaned back in his chair and said, "Let's get the Core Pulse logic pushed into the Portwave environment, quietly. No need to drag legal into every little thing." I stared at him. Then I said calmly, "Core Pulse isn't a company asset the way you think it is." He actually laughed. "Everything you built here belongs to TrendCore. That's how employment works." I didn't argue. I didn't grandstand. I nodded like I'd been corrected. But I went home and opened my LLC's folder, found the old onboarding packet from 2016, the original scope of work, the renewal amendments, and right there in the 2019 update, signed by the then CTO, the VP of Ops, and myself, was the clause we'd all stopped remembering existed. The Core Pulse scheduling engine shall remain licensed under operating agreement by VerityStack LLC, unless otherwise reassigned by executed transfer and consent from license holder. VerityStack LLC, my LLC, and no transfer had ever been signed. When they converted me to FTE in 2018, the HR contract focused on salary, options, NDA, and non-compete. The tech stack, they assumed it rolled over, but it didn't. Because what they used, they leased, like software, like equipment, like anything you don't own. Austin didn't know that. The board didn't remember. And legal? Legal only read what they were told to care about. I'd emailed the clause to myself just in case, flagged it, and copied it to a secure drive. I wasn't preparing for war. I was verifying reality, and suddenly, everything about Austin's rush, the secrecy, the push to bypass legal, the insistence that my scheduler become their property without delay, it all started to make sense. They didn't want to do it properly. They wanted to do it fast. Because somewhere deep down, someone must have known that if I said no, the whole 90-day migration pitch would fall apart before it even left the tarmac. And the higher they built the fantasy, the harder it would crash. They always fire you early in the morning. Something about control, about making sure you don't have time to pack a box or cause a scene or even say goodbye to your team. Like if they catch you off guard enough, you'll forget you matter. Austin showed up with HR like he was walking into a hostage negotiation, folder in hand, fake regret already loaded into his voice. He didn't sit. Didn't ask if I had questions. He just read the damn line like it was the weather. "We're moving forward without you, effective immediately." I didn't flinch. He stood there waiting for a reaction. Shock, tears, denial. I gave him silence. Then came the demands. Hand over the admin keys, passwords, vendor contacts, Slack ownership, Git access, and whatever you've got on Core Pulse. All of it. I folded my hands. What you're asking for doesn't exist in the way you think it does. HR shifted uncomfortably, probably realizing she should have read the contract, too. Austin's smugness cracked for just a second. "Don't make this hard." "I'm afraid I can't," I said with a small smile. He tried to speak louder, like decibels were leverage. "You're fired." I nodded. "Understood." I signed the termination acknowledgement, handed over the badge. Clean break, no dramatics. But here's what didn't happen. I didn't hand over the scheduler key because the scheduler didn't belong to TrendCore. It didn't belong to Austin, or the board, or HR, or the cloud migration team currently half-assing their way through a Portwave integration like it was a Squarespace blog. It belonged to my LLC, and without me, they had no way in. See, Core Pulse wasn't some folder of bash scripts and batch logic tucked into a shared drive. It was an ecosystem, a locked, orchestrated scheduling engine with dynamic compliance triggers, vendor-linked fallback modules, and a built-in validation guard that shut everything down the moment an unauthorized instance tried to replicate it. And guess what triggers unauthorized access? Firing the license holder. They didn't ask about dependencies. They didn't consult legal. They didn't even check the logs. They just assumed I'd built something they could rip out and replace like a printer cartridge. But what I built, it breathed. It adapted. And when they kicked me out with a folder and a fake frown, I didn't rage. I didn't plead. I didn't even unplug anything. I just walked. And somewhere, as I turned in my badge and rode that silent elevator down to the lobby, Core Pulse was still ticking, still scheduling, still routing, but only because I hadn't told it to stop. I wasn't their employee anymore. And the scheduler? It knew that too. They didn't even make it to lunch. At 11:14 a.m., dispatch pinged tech support. Route queues weren't pushing, not delayed, stuck. By 11:23, the automation team noticed that compliance flags weren't clearing even after override attempts. By 11:31, someone tried to do a manual reprocess and got a strange red banner across their terminal. License validation failed. Contact holder. The first thing they did, blame the junior sysadmin. Second thing, reboot the instance. Third thing, call Austin. By 11:45, IT had 5 engineers trying to regain access to the Core Pulse stack. They pulled old backups, tried duplicating the environment, even tried installing the engine on a sandboxed instance to see if it would run clean. It didn't. Every time, the stack stalled mid-execution with the same message: unauthorized host, license invalid, contact holder. They called me at noon. I let it ring. Austin, of course, spun it up as a licensing hiccup, told the board it was just a version sync issue, a simple fix. We've got top talent on it, he said. No disruption to clients. But on the floor? The ops team was watching a dashboard full of blinking red cues, orders flagged for manual intervention, routes timing out, invoices stuck behind logic gates they didn't understand because the logic wasn't theirs. They still didn't understand what Core Pulse was. Not really. They thought it was a package, a deployable. A folder of files with a fancy UI wrapper and some routing logic inside. What it actually was? An orchestrated logic engine with encrypted keys tied to a unique license validation chain, built that way on purpose, built to be stable, built to be safe, built to reject copies, and more importantly, built to recognize when it was being abandoned. When I set it up years ago, I included a handshake verification system that checked for valid license renewal tokens every quarter. If the license holder didn't approve the environment or the token expired, it didn't shut down. It just stopped allowing changes. It entered a read-only continuity mode designed to prevent disasters while flagging administrative violation. That morning, the system hadn't shut down. It had paused. Quietly, precisely. Like it was waiting for someone to finally notice what it had always been. Borrowed. Within 2 hours, we lost 3 SLA windows with our Arizona fulfillment client, missed 2 invoice triggers with our East Coast fleet partner, and the Pennsylvania warehousing contract, which we just renegotiated, flagged a critical delay that pushed their contract out of compliance. Austin tried to keep it contained. Just a systems adjustment, he told them. We're working through some updates. But operations wasn't buying it. They knew that a real update doesn't come with blocked permissions and a mystery error message. They knew what this really was. They started calling it a blackout. And by the time legal got involved, really involved, they weren't asking if the system was broken. They were asking who owned it and where that person had gone. Austin kept playing whack-a-mole with a corporate fire hose while legal quietly opened a drawer labeled, "Oh, hell." They weren't loud about it. They weren't fast. But they were thorough. And while Austin barked about missed dispatch windows and ran another pointless war room sync, Trencor's in-house counsel finally did what nobody else had done in 7 years. They read the contract. I don't mean the HR onboarding packet or the click-through TOS that everybody blindly signs on DocuSign. I mean the original contract, the one from 2016, the one I wrote with a tech-savvy procurement officer who's long since retired, the one that created VerityStack LLC as the designated architecture provider for what was then a bare-bones skeleton of a scheduler meant to get them through a vendor apocalypse. And about 40 pages in, under the section most people skipped because the formatting got dense. They found it. Clause 9C. I still remember how it was worded. The CorePulse scheduling engine, its associated logic trees, and downstream compliance integrations shall remain proprietary assets of VerityStack LLC unless an express assignment agreement is executed by the license holder. Rehosting, modification, or third-party deployment shall require written authorization from VerityStack LLC. That wasn't new. That wasn't hidden. That was signed. By the CTO at the time, by the VP of Engineering, by me, and never amended, never reassigned, never even questioned. They had been paying my LLC a flat quarterly fee, quietly processed by procurement, buried under legacy service renewals. Not once did anyone ask to roll it into internal IP. Not once did legal question who the license holder was. Because for 7 years, the system ran, never failed, never broke. And so everyone assumed it was ours. But it wasn't theirs. It was mine. And now, with me out of the building, they couldn't even fake compliance. The migration to PortWave? Prohibited. Not paused. Not pending. Prohibited. Because their new environment had already tried to duplicate the scheduler stack. Without a license, without authorization, without ownership. And that set off the clause triggers. The license denial flags. The system's protective lockouts designed to prevent rehosting without a valid signed key, which legally they were never going to get, because they just fired the one person who had the authority to give it. I didn't have to send a cease and desist. I didn't have to threaten legal action. The system handled that for me automatically. It followed the rules better than they did. Because I'd taught it to, because I'd learned long ago that trust in corporations has the lifespan of warm milk. Sooner or later, someone forgets who built the bridge they're standing on and starts acting like it was always theirs. But paper remembers, and this time, the paper was mine. Austin went into PR mode with the same fake conviction he used to sell quarterly goals nobody believed in. He stormed into the Thursday OPS lead meeting and, according to one of my former teammates, opened with, "This is a textbook case of sabotage," called me vindictive, said I was punishing the company for a routine personnel decision, like I'd thrown a tantrum and locked the doors on my way out. He was desperate to make it sound emotional, because if it was emotional, then it wasn't legal. It wasn't contractual. It wasn't his fault. But legal wasn't buying it. They'd already read Clause 9C, already confirmed that CorePulse wasn't company-owned IP, already double-checked the license history, already interviewed procurement about the renewals. So when he floated the word sabotage, they shut him down with a single sentence. You terminated her employment, then attempted to seize property the company doesn't own. No drama, no flair, just a door gently closing on his narrative. That's when he started calling me. 3 times, same day, 2 voicemails, 1 missed FaceTime. I didn't answer. I already knew what he was going to say. He was going to pretend he wanted to make it right. He was going to offer me a contractor retainer at half my previous salary to smooth the transition. He was going to spin the whole thing into some redemption arc where I played the loyal fixer in the 3rd act of his disaster movie. Instead, I watched my phone light up, then dim. Again. The 3rd voicemail ended with a message that made my jaw clench. Name your price. Like I was a problem to purchase. I didn't call back. I didn't respond. I just forwarded the audio to my attorney and added a 1-line email. Please handle going forward. That same afternoon, I got a text from a former colleague in sales. Big one just froze. Turns out, our largest client in Pennsylvania, a freight coordination partner with 12.5 mailers in annual contract value, had paused their renewal pending a resolution to ongoing system instability. 10 minutes later, another update. A West Coast client in Phoenix triggered their penalty clause, $120K per hour, for missed routing benchmarks. No warning. Just a clock, ticking. Austin tried to bury the fire with buzzwords. We're exploring parallel solutions. We're working with vendor support. We have a backup instance being provisioned. But there was no parallel, no support, no backup. Because CorePulse wasn't just code. It was an architecture, a living, logic-bound organism tailored to our contracts, our vendors, our compliance terms. And once the license severed, That ecosystem stopped listening. And when I stopped responding, it wasn't vengeance, it was silence. And suddenly, that silence wasn't resistance. It was the only thing in the room with a backbone. Every system failure, every unanswered request, every client breach, all of it pointed to one undeniable fact. The only stable variable had been me. And now I was gone. The call came while I was folding laundry. That's how uneventful day 3 felt. No screaming matches, no legal letters, no system hacks. Just me in a pair of sweatpants, stacking clean towels while the consequences of someone else's arrogance played themselves out across an entire logistics network. Seattle number. No contact saved. I let it go to voicemail. Then something made me check it. The message was short. A male voice, composed, professional. Hi, this is Mark Hartley from Rivetron Logistics. We understand CorePulse may be your licensed system. We have a time-sensitive opportunity. Please call back at your earliest convenience. No threats, no flattery, just a man who understood leverage when he saw it. I called back 15 minutes later. Mark didn't waste time. We've got a federal tender due next Friday, cross-agency route coordination. They want proof of adaptive load scheduling. Your system's name came up. We know TrendCore doesn't own it. Just like that. No pretending, no dancing, and that told me everything. Rivetron had always been TrendCore's punchline. Too small, too clunky, too regional. The kind of company you mention only when bragging about how far ahead you are. But now? They were asking questions the others were too proud or too slow to ask. They'd seen what CorePulse did, not just what it looked like, and they wanted it. I didn't lecture him, didn't tell him the mess TrendCore had walked into. I wasn't interested in revenge, I was interested in terms. We moved quickly. A 2-week bridge contract with a $450K signing fee, full license rights for 1 year, $2.4 million. Dedicated onboarding support, 6-week transition window, and the most important line item, I would not be an employee, I'd be a principal, an executive license holder with voting input on system evolution and deployment protocols. No badge, no boss, just ownership. I didn't posture, I didn't inflate the price, I named the real value, and they didn't blink. Because unlike TrendCore, Rivetron understood what they were buying. Not code, not compliance shortcuts, not a bandage. They were buying stability. Intelligence, design, the kind of backbone you build once, write, and never patch again. As we signed the digital contracts, Mark paused and asked, "Do you need time to think? We know this was fast." I looked around my quiet house, my silent phone, the sun hitting the floor like nothing was burning anywhere, and I said, "I've had time. This is movement." Because I don't swing power like a sword. I redirect it, quietly, precisely, and always to where it will be used, not wasted. Day 5 was when the silence turned into a storm. Not the kind with thunder and downed power lines, the kind where everyone's pretending nothing's wrong until someone important clears their throat and suddenly the whole building forgets how to breathe. The emergency board session wasn't scheduled, it was summoned. And when Harold Trent, the founder himself, walked into the 19th floor conference room, nobody laughed about legacy anymore. I knew Harold by reputation. Gray hair, classic suits, not flashy, not loud. The kind of man who didn't need to assert authority because rooms instinctively reorganized themselves when he entered. He hadn't been active in day-to-day operations for years, but when the Pennsylvania client paused $12.5 million in renewal contracts and the Phoenix partner triggered breach penalties totaling $480,000 in under 48 hours, Harold came back. The room went quiet the moment he sat. Legal-led, not with spin, not with panic, with bullet points, clear, measured, fatal. The CorePulse scheduler core is legally licensed, not owned. The license holder was terminated on Tuesday morning. The rehosting effort was unauthorized and violates licensing terms. The resulting access failures triggered financial penalties and reputational damage. Each line landed like a hammer on glass. Austin tried. God, he tried. He talked about legacy confusion. He tried to pin it on documentation lapses. He even tossed out the phrase, bad faith retention of system control, which sounded like something he stole from a startup podcast and didn't fully understand. Harold let him finish, then leaned forward, calm, even. Did you fire the license holder? Not her. Not the scheduler lead, just the license holder. Austin opened his mouth, closed it, looked around for help. There was none. Harold nodded once, then looked toward the door. Get out. He didn't have to say it twice. No yelling, no argument, just the quiet rustle of fabric as Austin stood and left the room he thought he owned. 2 hours later, I got the email from Trencor Legal. We'd like to schedule a resolution meeting to discuss a mutually agreeable path forward regarding the Core Pulse environment. I didn't even hesitate. I typed 7 words. My attorney will coordinate from here forward. No sign-off, no emotion, because I wasn't coming back. I wasn't negotiating. This wasn't a return. This was gravity doing what gravity does. And for once, I wasn't the one falling. The announcement dropped on a quiet Monday morning. No PR blitz, no flashy LinkedIn post with me crossing my arms in front of a warehouse. Just a line on Rivitron's internal bulletin. Effective immediately. Marin Shaw joins Rivitron as Chief of Operations. No confetti, no statement, no quotes. Just my name and the one title that would make sure no one ever confused who owned what again. I didn't return any of the congratulatory messages at first. Not because I wasn't grateful, because I was tired. The kind of tired that doesn't come from fighting battles, but from spending years pretending you didn't have to. Trencor took longer to stabilize. They tried patching the system themselves at first, even brought in consultants to replicate the stack from backups, but none of them understood the logic gates, the auto-trigger compliance checks, the cascade freeze conditions, because they didn't build it. They didn't own it. Eventually, they reached out. Not to me, never directly. All communication went through my attorney now. They negotiated a new license under very different terms. Limited use, no modification without written consent, quarterly audits, and a renewal clause tied to performance penalties. They didn't get to name the price anymore. They just got to sign it. Austin, gone. Scrubbed from the leadership page like a typo. No exit statement, no soft landing, just a disappearing act. I'm sure someone somewhere called it transitioning to new opportunities, but I knew the truth. He made a power play, and gravity won. Clause 9C was never updated, never revoked. Still alive, still binding, still a legal reminder that forgetting who owns the core isn't just sloppy, it's dangerous. People think victory comes with volume, with shouting, gloating, spiking the ball. But I never raised my voice, never barged into meetings to prove my worth, never threatened anyone, never wrote a single angry email. I just knew what I built, and I made sure it was protected. So when the system paused, when the licenses lapsed, when the calls came pouring in, it wasn't me fighting back. It was the system speaking for me. And when the dust settled, I didn't walk back through Trencor's doors. I walked forward, into something of my own making. Not for applause, not for revenge, but because power doesn't always need a voice. Sometimes it just needs terms.